First thing is call to order and next up is public comment. This is anything not on the liquor control board agenda. See, none. Approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? New business, we have liquor licenses. I'm gonna list of them, we'll take them all as one. Any concerns with them? No, we all like to go get a beer at these places. It's all good, we got a license.
Drugstore, yeah.
Is that a conflict of interest?
Is the golf course just for like on the golf course?
No, you can go there and get a burger, the burgers are.
You have a trade deficit with each place, but not a conflict,
Oh, well.
unless they buy booze back from you.
It's true.
Yeah, so I would
All right.
we
Entertain a motion to move them.
So now they call it a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now we'll move on to the select board. We'll call the select board to order. And first up is a public hearing on the proposed changes to the land use regulations. I think these have been out there. There's a cheat sheet on them, which is very helpful. And there's only one change that I would like to make. On item 18, it's merging the East Randolph, South Randolph, and North Randolph villages into a rural village district, which I'm fine with. It's the minimum building size or the maximum building size. Taking it down from 25,000 square feet to 10,500 in East Randolph. But we'll be merging them, so North Randolph, South Randolph, East Randolph is limited now to 10,500. I'd like to see that go to 20,000 if we have to go a little smaller in East Randolph. And I've chatted with Jeff about it and we're mad about it. There doesn't seem to be any opposition. There was no magic behind the number to lower it, so. Anybody has any concerns over that? Seeing none is wonderful. Any other changes anybody wants to make? If not, motion to any public comment on them? I don't see any, so. Right. Entertain motion to adopt them.
I'll make a motion to approve suggested changes, including adjusting it to 20,000 for Eastern. Oh, no, sorry,
It's the new rural village district.
for the new rural village district.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for all the work. That was a long one.
Going on for about 3 years, but very happy.
Good to have that one behind us.
While we're talking about land use regulations, I'm Matt Morosky, now the chair of the planning commission. Those are good changes to the regulations that have been made. There are a lot of changes that should be made, and I'm hoping over the next couple of years that we can bring to the select board a section at a time. A lot of the changes are really just sort of for clarity, that some of the sections on subdivision, roadways are really difficult for the development review board to work with, and they're difficult for the select board to work with when a project like Salisbury Square comes along, because it's just not clear what we're really supposed to do, and I'd really like to clean those up. And so unless the select board says no, I would really like to bring you a section at a time every few months or so to consider, so we can end up with some more functional town land use regs.
I think that's good. Just make sure we're not adopting something that puts another section wonky.
Yeah. Yep.
Otherwise,
Yep.
it's fine to do it piecemeal.
Okay.
Just remember, there's like quite a process.
It's
Right? We review it, then we put it out, then we have public hearings, and then we adopt.
We have to have a public hearing, and then you have a public hearing, so it is a little bit onerous, but so I'll try to pick the ones.
Maybe
I
it's
think are
a few
most
chapters,
critical.
if you have
Yeah,
ones that can go together or whatever, but.
You must want to think about a fall and spring cycle, maybe even,
that's a good idea.
because you might figure each one's a 6 month run up, give or take, to adoption, and that way you can
Mhm. And then if you on the select board or town manager have thoughts on which sections have been problematic or lacking, let us know. And we'll tackle those first. I know ones that have been difficult on the DRB. I'd like to get those first.
Unless that it's lacking in, but just to make sure we're coordinating and tying, if you're gonna look at some of the road standard stuff and the land use regs, we should also look at our road and bridge standards generally and make sure those two things completely harmonize. So that there isn't some weird, you say, driveway widths can only be this much or road
Right.
access, and this says,
They have to be a different value.
yeah, so just make sure we stitch it all together. If it's something with different layers of overlap.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Great. So now we'll move on to public comment. Is there anything not on the agenda? Seeing anybody jump around on the screen?
Is the Hometown Heroes banner process on part of the first item on the agenda, or is it?
The Hometown Heroes banners are not on the agenda, but the planning commission's review of the sign ordinance is.
Is. So I guess I would like to speak to the Hometown Heroes banner,
Okay.
since it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Lori Pierce. I'm a resident of Randolph Village. Been here since 2006, I think. I'm the former, I haven't been talking to the select board since I was a health officer here for quite a few years. And then I'm also a past commander of the American Legion Post 9 in town. And I'd like to just check in on where the Hometown Heroes banner project is in this process. I believe it was brought before the board in November. I did a little bit of research on it myself, since I wasn't here in November and December. And wanted to just give you some more information. It'll be very brief. The Hometown Heroes banner project's been around since 2006. Cities and towns all over the country are participating in it, have participated in it. These projects are usually brought to the towns by either the town government itself, a civic organization within the town, like the Rotary, or one of the military organizations like the American Legion or the VFW. They usually come to the select board or their planning commissions, but usually not the planning commission, requesting permission to run the project, which means gathering sponsors from the community. Usually it could be personal sponsors, private sponsors, or businesses. Sometimes town will sponsor someone. Of military people from the community. It's very simple. It's people from the community who have served honorably in the military, living or dead, but they don't. And then the organization goes forth, recruits the sponsors, and sometimes they've asked the community, the city or the town for money. So it's a very simple project. I was curious about any problems that they might have run into in the past. So I did a little research online, of course, and one of of course, there have been problems. The main one was money. We all know budgets are tight. So many times cities and towns will not be able to fund them. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. The other problems have been aesthetic issues that come up. People don't like the way they look. They are in the way of traffic. They distract the drivers. It's not a common one, but it has been brought up. And of course, the one we're familiar with here in Vermont was the fact that somebody who had been sponsored in Hartford, I believe, as a military veteran when he was young, later committed a crime in the community as many years later, and people felt that was not a great thing to put his picture up on street. So the vetting of the people who were being nominated was an issue. Other than that, these programs have been incredibly popular with the community, with the citizens in the community. So I would really encourage the board to consider giving permission for this project. It's if and hopefully when you do give permission, it's still a pretty steep hill to climb. We're 5 months into this idea, and it's going to take another 2 or 3 months to gather sponsorships, and have those people who are presented, the company make the banners and then bring the banners back. And I mean, and first, of course, do the vetting of the people who are sponsored, collect the funds. So we still got a high road to hoe here. I was at a meeting here where the objection was brought up that this project would open the door to future concerns about putting signs up on the road. Now, I understand that, and I know the obligation of the select board is to make sure everything runs well and is not going to cause any problems in the future. But from my simple point of view, it seems like the idea of not approving this because someone might come along in the future and request a objectionable sign put up is the same thing as saying, well, we won't give a permit to do the 4th of July parade because in the future, someone might come along like the Proud Boys or the Ku Klux Klan and say, well, we want to have a parade too. It's the same kind of idea. That this is a very simple idea. It's citizens in our community who've served honorably in the military being honored by our community. That's all it is. So very simple, and I hope you really will give it consideration. And I guess a more technical question would be, do we have to put it on the agenda again? Is this something that after you have your discussion about the planning commission's decision, which I happen to know, what's the next step after that? Thank you.
Any other items?
Any questions?
Okay. Seeing them, we'll go on to approving the agenda.
The only change would be number 6C. Postponing that for now until May. That's the hotel stabilization request. You'd be approving it with that moving out into the future.
Move to approve it with that change. A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Consent calendar, meeting minutes and warrants.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And now we move into the business of the meeting. First up is discussing the planning commission's review of the sign ordinance. Want to give us an overview of that fun task?
And I will do that. Again, I'm Matt Morosky, now Chair of the Planning Commission, and we were asked to review the sign ordinance in light of the proposal to for the Hometown Heroes banners. And this came after discussion of the select board, where it was the general consensus, as I understood it, was the select board when I reviewed the hearing too, that our current sign ordinance did not appear to allow the proposal. So the planning commission reviewed it and agreed that as written, the current signed ordinance does not allow for the Hometown Heroes banners. as proposed. We then, as a group, deliberated whether we wanted to, whether we should, and I should back up for a second. So it wasn't just our own read of the current signed ordinance that told us that the proposal was not allowed by the ordinance. It was also the main author of that ordinance, the former chair of the planning commission, who in some written testimony concurred that with us that the ordinance did not allow the proposal and offered some suggested changes for how maybe it could allow it. So between our own read of it and the written testimony of the former planning commission and author of the ordinance, we decided the ordinance does not allow the proposal as proposed. So next we considered the planning commission considered whether we should revise the ordinance to allow it. And in our judgment, unanimously, we decided no, it should not be adjusted to allow something like what was proposed. We then, at the following meeting, considered whether we should amend the ordinance to make it explicitly clear that something like this proposal is not allowed, and we decided not to. We decided just to leave the ordinance alone. So that is, those three things are what we looked at and what we decided.
So banners are not allowed?
Banners are allowed under certain circumstances that are defined within the ordinance. Banners in this case for such an extended duration and not associated with a discrete event, but that's not allowed by the ordinance.
But Chandler can put them up.
Chandler's banners, Chandler does put up some banners. We talked about that, and they are associated with an event, and the ordinance allows for that, for banners associated with an event for a limited duration of time. And Chandler's an interesting one also because it is a quasi municipal,
Right.
so it's a little bit different there also. But I hear what you're saying. We did talk about that.
Can I ask about the conversation you guys had
Sure.
about why you chose not to revise the ordinance? Can you just maybe give a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
more background?
Yeah, it was a number of things. One of them was the concern which you raised here that possibly somebody comes with a proposal for something that is say Proud Boys, for instance, or Ku Klux Klan. Those both those examples, in fact, came up. Somebody could come with a proposal that's just a lot less savory, and then the select board is in the position of having to with each proposal say yes or say no. We thought that was not in the town's best interest to have the select board, when we have an ordinance, the ordinance should be clear enough that the select board does not need to be ruling on each proposal that comes forward. We also thought as a group that it was not a particularly good use of town resources to have the select board having to review this, have town manager and staff of the town needing to facilitate the hanging of banners and that sort of thing.
I think they've spoken previously that volunteers would be hanging the banners and not necessarily the town. And I know that Paul Ray also who hangs up lights and wreaths for Christmas, also volunteered his time to help because he does have the ability to do this stuff. So I understand you don't want maybe specific people to ask for banners. If they came back and said, okay, we want Memorial Day, 30 days, and Veterans Day for 30 days, would that be more appropriate because it's a shorter amount of time?
Well, I need to go look at the language of the ordinance because there is a duration that's spelled out now, and I don't think it's 30 days. I think it's actually less than that. And that would be different, and that in the discussion we had as the planning commission, shorter duration was important. We didn't get into detail on just what the appropriate duration is, but we did talk about with a really extended duration of anything, be it hometown heroes or anything, it goes, this goes beyond advertising an event. It becomes in some ways a branding of the town. So duration mattered. Duration does matter. It should matter.
Was there a suggested number of days? Maybe I was unaware of that. I didn't know there was a particular, usually they go up for from Memorial Day to maybe the 4th of July or somewhere in that area of a month and a half, something like that. It's not a whole summer-long thing from what I have read about them. So I didn't know there was a proposal for an extended length of time. I was unaware of that.
It was made in November.
It was through the Memorial Day through Veterans Day is what the original proposal was.
That's a long time. Yeah.
We thought it was a long time also. But even before we get to the point, the issue of whether it's a long time, it was not allowed by the ordinance.
Because
Because the ordinance is clear on when about banners being associated with events.
Could we call Memorial Day an event?
Not about Memorial Day though.
I mean, it could be if we hung banners about veterans who have passed, that would be Memorial Day.
And you know, that to me and to our group might be acceptable, but that you would then be held to the very limited duration that goes along with event related banners.
So it's very strange that so many other cities and towns around the country have not found this an issue, except for the ones I mentioned, which is money and maybe aesthetics regarding and wind out in Santa Fe. So I'm kind of stuck by your reasoning because the same reasoning applies to giving a permit, not regarding this, for a parade, saying, well, we can give a 4th of July parade, which citizens love and enjoy and participate in. The same permit could be, someone could come in from an offensive organization and also want to have a parade, and you would have to say, no, thank you to that. So this, I thought within that ordinance, there was a proviso for being able to refuse offensive signs. Yeah, somebody puts up a sign. Isn't there?
There is, well, offensive to common sensibilities, which isn't defined anywhere. And then when you sort of scratch it all the way out, it then gets into fairly recent Supreme Court precedent about this very issue in terms of if you allow one type of speech in a public forum, you're now having to open up that forum to all types of public speech. So applying the common sensibilities becomes trickier if possible at all.
So logic prevails, the logic that would prevail on that is that you wouldn't give permission for anything, really.
The safest play, as I've said before, would be to not allow a single banner on a single light post.
Correct. And that would be particular to our little town in Randolph, Vermont.
Well, the fact that we have the downtown light posts and those light posts have banner arms. So once you think of the whole pool of municipalities, you've got to get down to the ones with the light posts and then the ones with the banner arms. So I don't see it very often might be as narrow as, is there somewhere to hang them? And with the electric company, if that's, you know, in the Williamstown example that's come up before where they don't have them, there's those types of things.
So I think the sense of logic around it is a little skewed. And retreating perhaps to a legalistic position. We're talking about a very simple project that honors the citizens of the town and not for, God forbid, for a huge amount of time or a very upset. And that's all it is. It's just pictures of family members living and dead. And some towns do it for their public officials, police officers, firemen, fire personnel. And they honor the people who serve the town, serve the city. And they do that as well. This is just it seems to me a very simple thing, and we're going to a very far place to.
And the planning commission talked about that also because we had heard that argument. We also heard from lots of folks who thought it was not simple, that it was not clearly unoffensive. We have Well, somebody in the planning commission meeting brought up that we had regular Friday afternoon protests in town against war. So I don't think it is as clear cut as some people think it's very clear cut that of course this should be acceptable, and there are others that think obviously this should not be acceptable. There is genuine disagreement
Oh, I'm
about
sure
that.
there is.
So we did discuss that, consider that also.
I think you also run into the aesthetic issue that you brought up, like. We put so much time into streetscaping downtown with the trees, and there's a tree replacement project. There's all that, and then what I heard from a few people is. You're gonna cover up all the work we've done on streetscaping the downtown with a banner on every light pole down through. And so I think Matt's right, that there's a wide variety, there's a fair number of people that support it and think it's a great thing. And then there's some people that are like, I don't want to drive down through downtown Randolph and just have it plastered with banners.
Yeah, I think their initial proposal that I was not present for in November might have been very ambitious. Because there's no guarantee that they're going to get anywhere near that number of sponsors. And this is the first year that, or God knows, next year, that they've even, the idea has come up. So, as I said earlier, it's a steep hill to kind of recruit people who want to put their dad or mom or brother or son on a banner to honor their military service. We haven't even, because we need permission, we're not going to go out and do that before we get permission to try. So so we don't know how many banners there would be. We really don't. But I thought it was clear that there's no money from the town. There's no use of town services, personnel to put them up, take them down. There's none of that. There's just a permission. That's the only thing that was lacking. To be without permission, it's not a go.
I wonder if it would make sense to try and like, instead of thinking about like, is this gonna work because it's fitting in this ordinance, like, it was brought up, like, are there other options that maybe are less ambitious? Cause I don't think it was about anyone having a problem with honoring our veterans in town, and so, there could be something related to an event or relate that maybe a partnership with the businesses that like, put up, honor our heroes during, May or November or something. That is something that could be allowed and fit into what is kind of like easier for everybody to just say yes, so that we don't have to worry about all of the other things.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but let me propose this. We already have a Memorial Day celebration at Grant Park, which is the Veterans Park up on Pleasant Street. We already participate in the parade, the Memorial Day parade and the 4th of July parade. The veterans do that. They have a visible presence. They have usually a Jeep and some flags, and they march and lead the parade. So, and then often, I don't know if they've done it recently, but they have a flag burning ceremony for retiring American flags that people like to retire after they've been torn or ripped. And so there is that part that's already, this is a community project. It's not just a veterans project, it's a community. Happens to use veterans as they're the symbol of it. The people who live in the Randolphs, who have veterans in their family, pay to have this put up. It's a community event. And often in the cities and towns that do this, they'll do it for a period of time, a month. I don't know how long the average one is, but I would guess it's about a month. And then they come down. And we have flags up all season.
It sounds like what Alyssa's saying is, instead of the approach that's happening now, what if we made it an event, like this month is honor of
Yes.
Hometown Heroes Month, and
Absolutely.
that's the month.
I like
It's an
that
event,
idea.
And has the banners that month and.
Yeah.
And it
I mean,
goes
you
that.
have to get
or-
businesses to, if like one of the obstacles is raising money and getting businesses to support it. That might be a way to get it started and just see how it is received by the businesses and the town. Being on a smaller scale to just get started.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a huge scale. It can't be a huge scale to start. We've never done it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is just sort of feeling out the community, seeing how many people are interested in being sponsors, who want to have it happen here. If there's not enough interest in the community, it's not a go anyhow.
So from the planning commission perspective. The sign ordinance for an event that was a town event to recognize hometown heroes. The banners on the poles for 30 days
Yes.
would meet that ordinance, right, as a town event. If it met the,
I'm not sure that meets the ordinance. Unfortunately, I rushed over and didn't bring a copy of the ordinance to see, to refresh.
if it was
my
a
memory what the
town
timeframe is.
sponsored event. Right, if the town said this month, we're gonna call it hometown hero month or whatever.
Yeah, around the 4th of July is an ideal
A
time to do
town
it.
sponsored event. And it feels like to me that meets the basic criteria.
I think a town-sponsored event, somebody in many ways bypass the ordinance because it's a town use of town facilities. So I don't know, I'm sure you'd have to grant the. You'd have to go through the ordinance if it's a town.
Well, then it
use of town
becomes an
facility.
event and not just a,
But what if it's like even, the poems are up in, I don't know if this is allowed by the ordinance either, but. Like the same way the poems are up in the business like windows now, like, could we just start with something like that? Just to see how it's received.
The planning commission talked about those sort of alternate avenues to do these sort of things around graduation time. There are signs in folks' yards celebrating their graduating seniors. There's certainly hometown heroes could use that model and populate lots of yard frontages, or use the hometown model and use business
well, I
storefronts.
think if the event comes from the town, which many of these do, they don't necessarily come from an outside organization like the Rotary or the American Legion, or the town itself has the idea that it comes from you guys. And you say, okay, we're going to do, July is going to be Hometown Hero Month. And this is what happens all around the country. I mean, I just read out in, I think it was South Dakota. They just closed their Hometown Hero project because it's what is it, the 1st of April, and they already have too many applicants and they've been doing this for quite a few years. And then they're overwhelmed with applicants, so they closed it because they can't accommodate all the people who want to participate. And now, I think it was Rapid City's a big city, but that comes from the city. It doesn't come from a private.
So I can tell you this one is not gonna come from the town. We don't have enough staff to do what we have to do currently.
Well, you'd have to have a collaboration.
It doesn't mean we can't set it as, whether it's through some resolution or something, that
Right.
whatever month is going to be recognized hometown heroes. And we don't have to limit it to veterans. Like you said,
Right.
it can be the police, it can be
it can be-
firefighters, it
right.
can be a whole bunch of first responders type folk, and I mean, the resolution could even encourage different groups to do things to honor them and whatnot, I think there's other ways, like through something like that the town can do it, but we're not gonna staff this.
Oh, no, I didn't
We
mean
can't
staffing
even
it.
begin to.
You would have to support it. You would
We
have-
can set
or-
out some criteria, we can set out a resolution that sets into effect some type of parameter of what we're looking at, recognizing and whatnot, but beyond that,
Because the way it sounds now, after listening to the plan, and some places don't even have to, and maybe they have a better sign ordinance thing. But this got diverted to the planning commission. It didn't have to go there. It could have been just what it sounded when I came in. It could have just come and said, oh, this is something the town would support. And set criteria. I think the idea of having a whole summer is
I think
ridiculous.
what we're talking about here tonight is drastically different than what was asked for. And we attempted to negotiate what was being asked for, and what came back to us was pretty much what you wanted to begin with. And that was every post from Main Street Bridge to Gifford.
Yeah, that's a little
And,
ambitious.
and some of them have 2 arms on them. So, you know, that is a lot of what was coming back for feedback was you're blanketing the town and
It's
this.
kind of overwhelming.
That's too much.
Yeah, I can hear that.
And so I think what's coming out now is we did take it to the planning commission to say, we need some public input on this. What makes sense? What came back was, what we have makes sense. This is way too much. And then what's coming out tonight through the back and forth is more of a, is there a smaller scale? Is there something we could do that would meet what your intent is without
Yeah,
smothering, for lack of a better term? And I think that's good. Anybody have any questions on the work that the planning commission did on the sign ordinance? Questions? Not seeing any. I think at this point, we're pretty much done on this topic. What we would need is, you know, somebody wants to come forward with a proposal for the town of recognizing some type of resolution or planning some type of celebration. Or
well, I will go back to the guys and see if we can get something that is a little bit more realistic, that is would be supported by the town. I think they would be.
well, what does that look like? If we were going to have some type of event or some
Yeah.
type of recognition month or whatever, what does that look like?
Well, I think, you know, I can't say off the top of my head whether that would be something they would all be happy with, because, but from my point of view, I think I would like to see the community recognize hometown heroes, whoever they are. Police officers, the fire team, members of the select board, anyone who serves the town. Well, I would like to see that. I think
Officers.
yes, we could help officers. I don't know if Melissa would like that or not,
I was
but
thinking you.
we would, I think it's a good idea to have it a certain shortened period of time, and then perhaps have something at the end, an event, or at the beginning that works into putting these up, and volunteers do that, not taxing the town in any way except for their blessing, so to say, on the event. And have some kind of a gathering at the park at the end or at the beginning to sort of kick it off. And then have it run for a short period of time, and then see how that goes, see if that can even be pulled off.
Memorial Day could kick it off, and July 4th could be the end of it.
Could be.
That's about a month,
Yeah, I thought of that.
5 weeks, but we'll call it.
Just too short, I think, to get stuff done.
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't know. I don't know whether they could get sponsors by that, but thank you.
Right. Well,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna move on the agenda, but I think we got the gist of that one.
Yeah, thank you.
An appointment to WERVA.
Is that? All right, well, he's here.
Thanks.
Glutton for
Hi, my name is
punishment.
Gerard Escola. One of my friends call me Jerry. Hopefully you've seen the note or the letter that I wrote, and how I got kind of like tucked into it. I was going through a class for the CPR and AED. And some of the individuals were a little concerned that Randolph does not have a representative on the board. And after a little bit of talking and stuff like that, I said, yeah, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I have some knowledge and stuff of certain things like that. And I truthfully believe that the town of Randolph should be represented on the board, especially for the emergency services and everything else like that.
Yeah,
And get feedback on their take, and you can also get feedback on what the town wants. That way we come up to some type of agreement. I don't believe the town has any responders on their, agenda, payroll or anything of that nature. We rely on outside help. And, there's sometimes talk about, I travel a lot, I run Granite City Tool, I was also in the military. And I do travel a lot, and there's pros and cons of individual towns having it. And then, how things go, you know, whoever is willing or they need to. I feel that I am a good go in between individual for both the town and the board.
So one of the issues we have is that the cost of Warba is growing exponentially every year,
Yes.
and it's getting unaffordable.
Mhm.
There's some other options out there, and it's on us to
You know,
decide if we're gonna look at them or not, but it just feels like there's no checks and balances there.
mhm.
Be like, hold on, like.
Yeah.
And you just get presented a number, which understanding, we don't have a rep there. That rep would be bringing stuff back to us and, you know, that's the way that is, but it's gone up. A lot, what's the number, like, we're at 415,000 this
Yeah.
coming year for ambulance service.
310 in fiscal 21, 22, I think, so.
So over 100,000 in just a few years. And when you look at them, comparing them to other ambulance services.
Yeah.
The percentage of their budget that comes from towns
Mhm.
is close to 50%,
Yes,
and other ambulances are 20.
Yeah.
So what's, you know, something's going on there, and it's not
I,
just that they're rural, it's
Yeah.
something's up.
you
Whether
know,
they're not billing, whether they're,
mhm.
something isn't adding up.
Yeah, and like I said, I think Randolph needs a voice. Because like I said, we bring it before and we vote on it and stuff like that, and I'm, you know, a resident of town and I vote. And I just wanna make sure what we're voting for and why. And maybe bring it to the town to say, all right, here's the particulars on what's going on. Here's their budget, and then say the same thing, give feedback to say, you know, how do we keep the budget in check? On there, because I really don't know where else we would go for emergency services. And to start something up, the manpower, the payroll and everything else like that is astronomical. And, you know, you look at it and say, okay, they're charging us 400,000. How much does it cost the town to run one themselves? You know, we got rid of the police department once and now we're bringing it back. So.
We're loving our police department.
But you know what I mean, though,
It's
I've been here since 1993 and I've seen a lot of evolving and a lot of things like that. And, you know, certain individuals, you know, when they come in and say, okay, we need this, but we don't need that. And how do you check it? And how do you put the balance on there that you put it on the town budget? And then try and explain to them saying, we need to have this passed. Or otherwise, what are the type of services? Because I'd hate to dial 911 or dial an emergency service and have nobody covered. Same thing with all the other towns. And then at the same time is at what cost? You know, I live 2 blocks away from the hospital. But if I'm having a heart attack, you know what I mean? Yeah,
I live on the
walk,
far
walk.
east
Yeah.
side, and we waited 45 minutes for them to get there one day, so.
Yeah,
I have a
you know,
little
and
different
it's
take
kinda,
than 2
you know, and
blocks,
it's kind
but
of hard
at the
because
same
the
point.
idea,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, but, yeah, it's kind of hard because when you're looking at what's response time, you're in Vermont, you're in the rural area. You know, I would be in the field and you're trying to look at it and say, do we get an ambulance there? Do we get a helicopter there? You know, what do we do to take care of the soldier that just went down? It's the same thing as the town. What's the area? What's the scope? So I think I would bring a lot of that to bring stuff to the town and have the dialogue to say, okay, here's what's happening and how do we come to mutual understanding this?
Do you have any questions?
We're trying to figure out if we're gonna make a change. Does that complicate like?
No, I think we have to have somebody there. If we have somebody that wants to do it, I think we still need somebody there, because there's a lot of conversation to be had.
We're up 34% between fiscal 23 and fiscal 26. That's how $105,000 jump in 3 fiscal years.
Look at that. The town's cost for Werba is up over 26% in 3 fiscal years.
You know, and that's one of the things that needs to be looked at on why, and look at the other towns and everything else like that, because, you know, truthfully, you know, items are going up. Things are happening.
But it's the percentage of their budget that comes to a town to pay is what I'm most
Well,
concerned
that's
about.
what I'm saying, though, and
Right?
see,
Like,
and see
why
why.
is 50% of their budget being
Yeah.
charged off the towns when other ambulance services, it's 20?
Yeah, you know, and that's some of the
Some
things, and that's some of the things to bring up to say, okay, how do you slice your budget, you know, how do you give it to Randolph, how do you do things like that?
There's a formula, per capita formula.
Yeah.
That's how they allocate it, which I'm, you know, I think that's okay. It's how do they figure out which portion of their budget
Mhm.
goes to the
Yes.
towns versus is billed to
Right.
services?
And that's one of the things the representative of the town can come in and say, okay, how do we work it? How do we do it?
Is what we do.
Because I'm being told that there's been nobody there for a year and a half. And how does it come back where somebody walks in and says, right, here's how we figured things out, and this is your cost. As opposed to the representative would be coming up and saying, we're talking about it, we're seeing how things go. And what's our input to say, you know, because I don't think we've had anybody have an objective to say, all right, why are we getting charged 50%? This number of calls and everything, it's a lot of work, and I think or let's put it this way. I would not be here advocating for the appointment if I didn't think that I would be good for the town and Werber.
Can I ask a question? Is there an empty position? Is that what he's referring to?
Yes, yeah, there
It's
is.
been empty for over a year,
Okay, and
We've had
and
nobody
in
step
short,
forward.
he's volunteering for it.
correct?
Okay,
But I have to be
We've
appointed,
advertised for it for a year and nobody's come forward,
right?
so we're loving it that
Yeah.
he's here. We're just having a conversation about what the issues are.
Well, yeah, and yeah, I
Okay.
showed up and they said, well, that's great that you're stepping forward, but you still have to be appointed. Okay,
okay, so is this just a discussion of it, or are you gonna appoint him this
We're gonna
time?
appoint,
Oh, okay,
okay.
okay, good.
It's on here for
Clear now.
Yep. all right, any further questions? If not, any motions to appoint? Everybody has the one.
I'll make a motion to appoint. I was looking for his name.
Gerard
Gerard
Mesco
Mesco.
Junior.
I'll
second that. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
Tag, you're in.
Right.
Thank you for joining pay.
So I just looked quickly at Barry Town's ambulance fund budget for the upcoming fiscal year, and the private insurance and self-pays plus public insurances are 75% of their revenue. That's a full-time paramedic intercepts, which are also paid differently. Other town contracts, so there are different ways to pay.
Well, see, I think one of the things, if you don't mind me interjecting, is maybe that's something that we need to look at as a town. To say, how much is it gonna cost us to do it? Plus also, what is our responsibility if somebody calls us out? You just can't say no.
Right, but the point being that we've got a 50% property tax model and
Yeah.
it's a 75% insurance model.
Yeah.
20 minutes north.
That's good. All right,
Great,
thank
thank
you.
you. Consider an RACDC Salisbury Square grant.
Should have had you move this one earlier. We kept it as a placeholder. There isn't anything to act on. We did try to round up if there's anything needed. Just as a note to the Forest Church heading phase 2 grant application that was in the works has been pulled back. It's a longer story for another day, but there won't be any action needed on that either, but. Carefully monitoring everybody's respective capacity and talking to the entity and the state to make sure that we're all in the right spot.
We are cruising through this agenda.
No,
Oh,
we
snap.
schedule you guys every week. This is, you're just flying. I like jinxed it.
Yeah, thanks. Arlington flood hazard buyout.
All right, so Jeff's joined us for this one. The owner of 5 Arlington entered the flood hazard buyout program following the July 2023 event. This is the property that sits at the very sort of top of the hill. I don't know how many of you can see it from over toward, was that 12A? Looking back, the steep bank with the red house that looks precariously perched above it. It's that property. And so we have kept the process rolling so that the homeowner could have this be a consideration. Vermont Emergency Management has been helping out. Jeff's really spearheaded this project. This is just sort of a check-in to make sure you're okay with us proceeding. We haven't accepted anything, but due to deadlines, we had to get some paperwork in with the state to keep the buyout program running. So some of it's when we say consider approving, it's really a blessing for that effort for the homeowner to keep moving forward. The hesitation in this one is when you combine it with Langevin, which sort of sits down below and then borders up there. You connect it around that whole oxbow and you get to our little sliver that's walked out continuously since July 23. You've got one really big section of eroding shoreline. And in the case of the slopes behind Arlington, some really steep grades. So the thought of being able to take those properties and or armor some or all of it, because moving the river is not an option. That's the tricky part. And it's usually the municipality is the owner in a flood hazard buyout program. That's why you see, Berry City, for example, trying to be judicious in setting a zone, X number of feet from certain hazard areas, not considering buyouts or ones that maybe are outside those. Because you end up as the owner of the property, and once you've remediated it and or owned it and removed structures, there's nothing else you can do with it. You can't develop it. You might be able to use it for certain recreation and other uses, but there really isn't much you can do with it. So just reached out to the Vermont River Conservancy to see if maybe they would, especially if the two parcels went together. Tricky one with the Langevin, the 15 Lincoln it's tied up in stuff.
Yeah, apparently the owner of that property owes more in taxes than the property is worth. So the buyout program, just to be clear, with this buyout program, if the FEMA buys it out or if the state buys it out, it becomes the town of Randolph property. And that's really the issue, especially with 5 Arlington, is what's the liability if all of a sudden Randolph owns this property on top of a hill that's gradually wearing away and the houses behind it become at risk. And I don't know, I really don't know what the liability is, but that's the question. So what we're trying to do is get the river, what we request is to see if the River Conservation Society, I don't think that's the real name, but folks that River
Conservancy,
would be interested in owning that whole bit of shoreline. So the town doesn't take on that responsibility, but I don't know if I have a lot of faith in that happening, but we have that request, and my question would be, okay, what's next? If that doesn't go through, which I think is a pretty good chance it will not go through, but there's still a possibility. And they are looking into that, but I don't have an update on if they would consider that or not, so.
But we got the other one too, right?
Well, if it goes
Right,
through,
over on Lincoln.
right,
And so Lincoln lost some more in the utility pole.
yeah, this is
Went
gonna
over
be an
the other
ongoing
night.
issue, I think, up in that area, so.
And so I think you've got that property is at a point where they need to make a decision
Right,
of what to do.
They-
And right now, there's not much we can do,
right,
from what I understand of the site, because it's sand.
exactly.
So if we
yeah,
add rock at the
that's-
top, we're pushing the sand out into the river at the bottom.
Right,
Like,
there's a good report, I think it is in the packet, that shows the slope, how large it is. I think the impressive thing to me is if you look at the house, there's a person standing out by the house and they look literally like an ant up that hill, which shows the scope of it, but
This is the bottom one.
the other houses on Lincoln were offered a buyout, but they did not want to get going, they did not want to have that, to sell their property or look into the program at that time. They would prefer a shoring up of the bank, which I don't know, I mean,
But whose bank is it to shore up,
exactly,
right? Like, we
Right.
got into this over on the Stock Farm Road.
right,
And
yeah,
to shore that up, you gotta go way upstream and you gotta come down around that whole bend
Oh, yeah.
to the
Yeah,
other side and FEMA says we're not eligible if it's not ours, and that's not ours.
Right.
Like, that's well, given what it costs on the Stock Farm Road, what are we talking?
Well, yeah, because of access and the slope, steepness.
Yeah.
What we've done and even a little bit what we did on North Randolph Road where we had the steepness, we didn't have the absolute height. But some of those benching, other little tricks that we did to stabilize those slopes and to get on either side, we don't have available to us here because of the
Well, it's not only that, it's all
sheerness
sand,
and the length of it too, like,
but it's sand.
yeah, so
There's no clay in there, there's no other material to help hold that benching.
you can't plant anything in it and have that grab it, like it's,
No. I honestly feel like the state ought to own this. I don't think it's a town ownership.
Yeah, if we can
I think
figure
you're
out
right,
how to
there's a
make that
liability
happen, that's
there.
what we're trying to do. I don't know.
I don't think the river
That process
folks
looks like.
are gonna want it either, but
Yeah.
then it almost feels like one of those, when somebody dies, they leave a gift to the state or something, like. You go A&R. Protect your river.
but all waters are waters of the state, right?
Yeah, like,
State waters are eroding those sandy soils.
well, and when they start taking over new territory, you can't put it back, so. Like, we just wait a little while. Your river will be over here and you'll own it anyway, so why don't you own it now?
Yeah. We can keep it going and push them on that. I mean, at the end of the day, you'll have the sort of the decision point of do you want it or don't you?
But I don't. The problem with the Langevin one is you can't get in there to take the house down,
True.
right? So they do the buyout, the town's expected to take that, to remove the structure.
There is a grant, that I think covers most of that cost. But
And this one.
how you access, I don't know, but the abutter on the other side of the river is not cooperative, so.
But with Arlington, the VEM would cover, they would essentially facilitate the removal. That part of the project they'd manage, if I understand with Arlington, that being the difference, whereas it's lumped into the earlier grant for Lincoln Ave, because that one came before the board not long after I got here. So we're talking like 21-ish, maybe early 22, we did that one. It's a different program, pre-July 23 event. And so, but yeah, access, especially in that case, it's gonna probably be through the river in some form. Because there isn't any way to go over the bank.
If we wait a while, we could put a catch fence in the river and get it that way, but
Yeah,
it's, I mean, I honestly think that it's time for us to have a more of a sit down with A&R and be like, hey, look. Here's a tough one for you.
Mhm.
Cause we're gonna lose that whole bank. There's multiple houses up there. It's sand. We're never gonna be able to put pilings in that depth to hold that.
yeah.
And if you had to put pilings in, holy moly.
It would be interesting to just have them come in and do an analysis of like where they really expect the river corridor to go in the next 100 years. Because as the river moves further, it gets harder for it to keep going in that direction, right? So at some point, it's gonna go as far as it's gonna go. It's not necessarily just gonna keep going throughout that whole neighborhood. It's gonna stop somewhere. And I think they can give us probably at least some sense of what the
I think
likelihood
it's
is of it.
borings, right? You gotta do borings to figure out how far back that bank is sand.
I mean, even if they just assumed that it was all sand, like what would that? What would that mean? Because at a certain point, this river is not gonna move anymore. It's gonna stop its oxbow and it's gonna cut it off. Yeah. In fact, I even noticed, I just happened to be on that Lincoln Ave at the end of it where the pole was. I noticed the other day, I was like, oh my. And what I did notice, which was different there from previous site visits, was that in the past, the drop off was like straight down, like dozens of feet to basically to the river. And now it's a much more gentle slope than it was. So it might be that it's finding its more natural, I forget what they call the word, it's angle of repose And maybe, I'm certainly not an expert, but maybe we're not gonna see a whole lot more erosion in that area. But it'd be nice to have the experts tell us what they think.
Yeah, the analysis is fine until you get an event like Irene, and then all bets are off at that point, so.
Yes and no. I mean, it could be that an event like Arena actually helps because maybe the water is so high that it carves that bank that on the other side, carves a channel on the other side.
Oh, yeah, no.
Where you have a
anything's
path,
possible, that's the thing.
you know, where now you have, you know, a path, that's the path of least resistance and.
Yeah,
But again, like, you know, the people who study river morphology have pretty good models of how all this works, so. Like, they should
Another
be
reason
hopeful.
to pull A&R in and be like, hey, what's this look like, right? What are we dealing with here? See what they can tell us.
We had a river expert here a few minutes ago, we left.
I know, I was gonna say.
Don't you see these people in your committee on a regular basis, Larry?
Not lately, no. We did all the river card work last year. We don't have anything going on like that
You
this
know who
year.
they are, right? Right.
so just quick summary on, if I may, on 5 Arlington is where we are now is we just submitted all the grant paperwork just to keep the grant going. It hasn't been accepted yet, but there was a deadline. If we didn't submit by a certain date, then she would have no chance of participating in the program. So we thought we'd at least put the paperwork in and keep that going, and then we'll try to figure out what to do with the property if it progresses. But the way the program is written now, they pay the owner of the house, they pay to have the house demolished. I'm not sure if there's a match. If there is, it's fairly minimal compared to the whole cost. But I think this program, there's another program that covers the match, so there's no cost to the town for that. But the end game would be that we own that property. So,
Unless we can get somebody else to take it.
yes,
What did the River Conservancy say?
they said they would look into it. I'll get back to you in 6 to 8 weeks. And I called them twice this week and haven't heard anything, so.
Magic.
But it's only been-
That'll look not so good, right?
Yeah. It's only been 6 weeks, though. But yeah, no, I would not put a lot of faith in that. I think it is good to look at options.
Jeff can't leave until he gets an answer from the River Conservancy, so.
Okay, I'll go, where are they?
So every time he calls, I call and I say, don't answer.
Helpful, huh?
Love my boss. He's awesome.
How far back does this property own from the structure? Any idea?
How far toward the river or toward the,
Like, how much land is it that they,
yeah.
the Langevin one was a bigger parcel?
Yeah, this one
right?
is,
Yeah.
I think it's just under an acre.
I've got the system up here. I'll confirm that, but I think Jeff's probably gonna be pretty close.
Yeah, it's a residential lot. It used to be a lot bigger.
But this image in their report isn't the current.
That's pretty
Conditions.
close. Yeah,
Right.
oh, it's interesting what you said
Oh,
about
but this
sand.
is this house right here, the bank's all the way back, right? This one.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So this
that-
is all
yeah,
gone.
Yeah.
And I think Larry's right, it's gonna just cut right
Mm-hmm.
through here and be done with it. Like, there's a peninsula out there that it's gonna take off, but then we still got quite an arch there.
1.17 acres. Whereas
Before it all washed in.
Langevin by comparison, because Langevin is down below it, and then that property actually goes sort of upriver and around the corner along the railroad tracks is
Yeah, the land.
14.5 acres.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique, weird property, the way it curves around, and I think the one thing that's going for us that may make the River Conservancy interested is combined with that Langevin property, that is a pretty good stretch of river. But, who knows what it's gonna look like in even 5 years. So. But, To me, the railroad track's at risk on that one side also. Possibly.
Looking at the GIS map that shows land that's no longer there. I would guess because it's right up against it on one of the corners,
Yeah.
just before it comes into that oxbow.
Not been seeing this kind of stuff, like. Looks so, like such a sad thing, and they just make them bright and pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is sad. It's a single
Yeah.
woman that lives there that
Yeah.
is running out of options pretty quickly, so.
I remember going out there with John and Megan, Freddie and I. As we were just assessing damage, when we'd gone down to where the culvert comes out off Lincoln, and we went up to that one. We got reports of it. And we walked out her backyard and off to the side where the person's standing in the photo. And every time somebody moved, you could feel it was like standing on top of a drum. You could sort of feel like the boom, like a little bit of a hollow, bouncy thump. And John and I, being excessively brave human beings, let Meg and Freddie get a little farther out as we backed slowly but surely away.
Yeah, it's
Profiles and courage right there. Old Hank and Juice.
I just sent a message to Rob Evans, who's the head of the Rivers Program.
Yeah.
And see if he can offer us some, describe them our question and if there's any assistance they might be able to offer us.
Yeah.
See what he says.
How would you like some land in Randolph?
Some what?
Land in Randolph.
cheap,
Hey,
Waterfront property.
yeah.
So I have a question. Aside from what we've discussed, I'm not quite sure I understand completely what the liability is for the town. If we were to allow the buyouts to go forward and we were to take on the property.
It'd be continued erosion and threatening either, it'd be our infrastructure beyond it, which we'd have to deal with if we got to that spot, but any of the other private properties that are then sort of bordering it, because,
Right, but I guess what I'm wondering is,
you know,
if we own that property, if the buyouts happen, we own that property. The infrastructure is separate, because that's gonna happen no matter who owns it, right? Then at some point, let's say the river does keep moving and threatening those homes. Well, at some point, then the land that we take on is gonna disappear into the river. Like. We don't, like, do we even, like, what's the legal status of it once it's gone? Like, do we even have? Like, any kind of liability if it's like completely eroded away?
That's what we got going on the other side. We own the land that abuts Nick Pappas's property. Some of that's washing away is ours,
Mm-hmm.
and right now we're saying it's,
most of ours is gone even right there.
it's an act of God, I mean.
So,
we're
that's what I'm
not
saying, do we really
intentionally-
have liability if there's nothing to connect the liability to, like the land is?
You probably do make a defense on the dual act of God sovereign immunity claims, and essentially. I would guess. We have to be sued, go to VLCT. In terms of passive would provide, would be a process. Because there'd be no way to stabilize that slope, that would be affordable for us.
If we own the land currently. And there's natural events that are taking place, is that different than if we accept ownership of it, knowing that it's going away and. Removing the buffer to somebody else's property?
It could be, but you'd have to, I think, be able to make a claim that we actively contributed to the continued erosion, when really it's. We could demonstrate that we've explored remedies and options and alternative ownership and raised this concern to the state about, hey, it's your river. Because essentially, the argument against us is our argument against the state. Your river eating our property, causing property loss and damage. And ours a little bit, which in turn is creating liabilities for us.
So if we get sued, we should bring the state into the code.
I think I always joke, if we're going under the bus, we're reaching for somebody else's ankles.
It might be good, let's have that conversation with Rob. Like, okay, so what does this mean? What happens? Where's it going? And then what happens if it's gone? Like. How does that work? They have all kinds of good lawyers up there. I'm bring Catherine in the conversation, because it would be an interesting one.
Maybe we reach out to passive. Should
Maybe
be somebody
it's-
there.
Maybe there's a way to indemnify or the hold harmless.
Maybe.
How are we liable for land that doesn't
Somehow.
exist anymore? That's the question.
So we say those things. Hypothetically, we take land, that land is there now. Suddenly that land is separate grains of sand that are in Bethel or Long Island Sound or wherever they end up. So now we no longer own a physical thing. But the lack of a physical thing endangers the thing behind it. What are we liable for?
But the private property on the other side bought that property, assuming there was a buffer there that would be maintained and still be there. Did the town, was the town negligent in not investing $1 million to hold that bank up there? To make sure the other guys land stayed there. And I think we just got into this, and I can share the decision with you about unreasonable expectation of what maintenance means or of what something like that means. And we won, but it was. I think there's a balance there too, like they can't expect you to invest millions of dollars for them to have an expectation of, that their property's safe from a natural disaster. Interesting.
So unless you object, we'll keep working the process. We'll work these questions.
Yeah, I think it's worth them, but Larry's outreach to Rob Evans and see what they think is gonna happen, and then maybe to A&R's legal folks to be like, hey, what does this mean
I'm
if
gonna
the
say,
town says yes and if the town says yes and your river, A&R.
Yeah.
Eats our bank.
your river, all waters are waters of the state.
What happens?
Gonna ask Passive to give us an award for being most entertaining, most enterprising, and most mind expanding municipality in their portfolio. We've gotta, even just after this week, we've gotta be.
All right, audit RFP. Yeah, right.
It's really fine.
Just be ready to go for
Say like
it.
it's perfect beast and it's really fine. You wouldn't even have to sit there.
You don't need a water slide, just, grab one of those foam boards that kids slide on and down into the river. All right, RFP for the audit.
It's time. On a couple of different levels. Thanks, Jeff.
I hear the word audit.
He's out.
Yeah. So it's been a few years since we've gone out. I just took the last time we did it, updated it, made sure the single audits are in there because we're gonna have federal funds in excess of those thresholds. We're projecting in each of the years, we'll plan for that. And if for some reason we don't need to, we don't. Pretty easy thing to take out. But as a best practice, you want to be every 2 to 3 years with these things. We're going on 3 to 4. Plus this relationship in terms of the efficiency of deliverable is.
Run its course.
Yes, that would be a nice way to put it. So it would be nice to have a fresh dynamic, to start anew, and to also get the fresh eyes on our process controls. So this will be a 2-year with an optional 3rd year. And then hopefully at that point, we're on a cycle where we can just roll in to say an every 3-year model, 2 to 3 year model.
Any questions or comments on the RFP? No. Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Road certificate, bridge standards, this is our annual
The TA 60,
certification.
yeah.
Anybody have any questions on that one?
If I could, those of you and V-Trans and those of you in the legislature, if this could just come with a, hey, can you attach your budget as approved? to show what you're spending on everything else? That'd be a lot easier because in order to break it down into winter maintenance and non-winter maintenance, it takes me about 3.5 hours, which doesn't sound like a lot
No, that sounds like an awful lot.
because I have to disentangle how we spend things, figure out what can be split, figure out what's winter, figure out what's not winter, and then
So the question is, whether they need that data broken out like that for?
yeah, when we could show them, because the way our budget is, it shows you the salary. You can see exactly what we're spending, what we're taking in for revenue, that we're meeting all of the targets that are set out in Title 19 in terms of making sure that we're not just taking the state highway aid money and using it to buy down taxes. It's a small fraction of what we raise.
I doubt that that's in statute, so stop looking at me.
I've raised it to them, I think, every year since I started doing these, just as a, hey, it would be nice if we could. And I get what they're after, but
I think there's a summary statewide that goes up to the highway
Yeah.
on that, but I'll look into it.
it's a small matter, but you will save Judy the expense of having to listen to me complain about the 3.5 hours I spent pulling it apart. Do it for Judy. If you don't do it for me, do it for Judy. And I actually have to get a clean one to sign, but so I didn't double
Did
set
you
it.
put some of your frustrating notes on it? That might be legal.
Can you share them?
Turning it in a different way?
Hmm?
Have you ever tried turning it in a different way?
Here's my budget, you figure it out.
That's right, tag, you're it.
I mean,
I haven't.
I have heard there's interesting things that get submitted.
Yes, there is.
An
All right.
application that just says, ditch, don't drain the circle on the map.
All right, and motion to approve,
So move.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The LEMP.
So they used to be doing May, but they moved it back to June.
June 1st.
June 1st. So we updated it, highlighted some questions such as the fact that our alternate EOC at some point was designated as the town of Braintree's town office. We haven't changed that, but highlighted that for you. The shelter in here, I think, has been changed. The highway folks have been, the EMDs, co-MDs have been reflected in here. Titles, phone numbers have been updated. You have to take out some old references too, quite a few. Missing any other big changes?
So our
High
EOC
school as an
used to be
alternate.
here. We moved that to the village station.
Mhm.
I think that was part of one of our grants. But I have not ever seen Braintree town offices as our backup. That's their only office. Isn't it gonna be theirs?
I would think so. I suspect this was a holdover from when maybe an EMC was also a EMD somewhere else, or might be one of those wrinkles.
What is our, what are our other options?
I think this would be a good alternate EOC, and then but if you wanted to designate something, say out in the center.
Some location, we work in ETC on having space for
I'd
the
say VTC maybe.
space, but that seems like. Depending what it was, but if it was flooding, it's gonna take out the village station.
Right, I mean, Village
Right.
Garage would work, it's got internet phone.
Just right next to the.
Sorry, Center Garage,
Station. for
Center
it's
Garage.
all going on.
Sorry. Center Garage.
Yeah. This room, we take over the break room upstairs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not, in an event like that, you're not running the school buses, so you wouldn't need to.
Hopefully. I would say that's a good one to change it to as your backup. Only other one I saw, we list a partial list of contractors. Somewhere in here. I didn't see that.
I can add whatever you want added or taken on.
Well, I'm not sure why we would put them in there.
People that ask for it.
I know, but it doesn't make any sense.
And
to
I
me.
listed some of the ones that I know that we already have certificates of insurance for and that we work with.
Yeah, here it is. I think sources are a good one. I don't know, I just don't know that I would put contractors. Like building, where do we get building materials? Where do we get aggregate? Where do we get those type of things? I think, contractors and whatnot is something we would ought to have a separate. And we don't, right, because we ended up going afterwards and putting an agreement in place with some of them.
Yeah, we did
So,
that mini
yeah,
solicitation or whatever, mini RFP almost. Send it to them all directly and then sign them up from there.
in some cases, they have a whole contracting process for that. I don't think they want to do that. And that's sort of what they're looking for. Who do you currently have under contract that you could just pick them up and assign them work under that contract? We don't have that.
And there's a separate section for that, and we didn't put anything under there.
I don't think we need to. We had I think when we did it last time, we had that quick process and it worked.
Yeah,
That's a better, you don't know what you need.
well, and I think FEMA probably, that's how we satisfy FEMA's procurement. Right in the immediate event stages, at least.
And you're right, they're a resource, but I. I'm more nervous about opening ourselves up, knowing what we faced on some of these projects. To, oh, look, you've already approved these two that do all the work, kind of thing. And we haven't. My preference would be to take them off.
We could even just list multiple options or something like that, and just say multiple. For the first two.
Or we could even call it, construction equipment. Multiple entities. And then,
Cause we did rent
You know,
stuff from different places.
facility contractors, multiple. Anybody see any other items in here? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve those two changes.
I just have one thing real quick. I'm listed as one of the alternates, but my phone number is not there, so I can help add that in after, as long as we can prove it without that right now.
Yep.
Okay. Then motion to approve.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Adoption for the resolution for Union Bank. Can we move that to executive session?
Sure.
Managers report.
I don't know if you have any questions for us. I don't have anything new or unusual that we haven't otherwise covered in some other form.
Okay,
I think hard not be unusual. I don't have to be new.
I would go with that.
Yeah. Unusual seems fair.
I will entertain the motion to find that we need to go into executive session.
The motion to find that executive session is necessary and prudent, and that premature general public knowledge would place the town in a disadvantage.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Make a motion to enter an executive session pursuant to VSA section 313A 1A Good God,
As listed.
as listed.
I second that one too.
All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.